We are so lucky to have Joy Nelkin Wieder here with us today. Hi, Joy.
Hi.
I was hoping you could tell us about the story seed for the Passover Mouse.
Okay, so the story seed comes from the Talmud, and the Talmud is a book of Jewish laws, and then the rabbis have commentaries on the laws. It was written a long time ago, and there's many volumes of the Talmud. And there's one volume that talks about all the laws about Passover. And I was reading through that book, researching a different book, and I read a passage about the rabbis discussing homes having chametz, which is leavened bread in them. And maybe a mouse would come into the house with a piece of bread after someone has cleared their house of all their chametz. And what are you going to do? And what if a mouse comes in and a different mouse comes out? What are you going to do then? And they went round and round and round in this long discussion, and the idea for the story just popped into my head.
Wow, that's fantastic. So it just goes to show that you should always be open to stories coming to you at any time.
True. You never know where a story's going to come from.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us about your story seed.
Sure.
I think it's so neat that the villagers all helped Rivka prepare for Passover, and I was wondering if you had any help preparing the Passover Mouse for publication.
Oh, good question. Yes, I had a lot of help getting the Passover Mouse ready for publication. I say the most critical help I had was from my critique group. And a critique group is a group of writers who read each other's stories and give feedback. And one of those critique members is interviewing me right here today.
Well, that's true, but we have a lot of people in our group. Could you maybe tell our young writers what kind of feedback people in the group gave you that helped make your writing stronger?
Sure. Some of the feedback that I got was about the conflict, what was going to happen to these people, the houses that have the mice running through them, and how is this conflict going to get resolved, and whether the subject was too Jewish in its outlook, to maybe make it more accessible for people who might not know what all the laws of Passover are about. So that's something I had to think about too.
Wow, that's great. That's true. In order for a story to be interesting, it usually does have some sort of conflict in it.
That's right. Conflict is key to keep the readers turning those pages. That's what you want.
That's totally true. And I was thinking, we see the story from Rivka's perspective, but I was wondering how it might change if we were told the story from the mouse's perspective. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Wow, that would be very interesting. Many times I actually teach creative writing to students in 4th to 6th grade, and I ask them to look at different points of view and how a story might change. Let's write a story from the mouse's point of view and see what happens. Sometimes that comes up in our critique group, and I might try it that way and see if I like it as an experiment and see what happens.
Wow, that's a neat idea. So that's a great tip you just gave our young writers. When we're trying writing stories, we shouldn't just try it from one perspective. We should try it from a few different perspectives to see which one feels the strongest.
Right. And sometimes it can be a point of view first person versus third person, and you can try it both ways and see what happens.
That's true. I'm curious, was the Passover Mouse always from Rivka's perspective, or did you try having it from other people's perspectives?
I think it's always been from Rivka's perspective. I made her the central character because I wanted her to be the person that needs the help. So the mouse is the vehicle that brings the village together to give her the help. And that's why Rivka's the central character.
It's such a sweet story. I love the happy ending. I want happy endings. What can I say? Speaking of happy occasions, I was hoping you might share with our readers some of your family's Passover traditions that you have.
Oh, sure. We love hosting Passover Seders. It's a time when the whole family gets together. It's a ceremonial meal, and there's different components to the meal. But we like to keep the kids interested. So there's a lot of different parts of the Passover Seder that are oriented toward children. There's the 4 questions where the children get to ask questions, and then in the answering of those questions, we help them learn about the Passover Seder and the Passover story. We take a piece of the matzah and we hide it. It's the afikomen, and the kids have to find the piece, and when they find it, they get a reward, and that's always fun. So we have a lot of different traditions, especially around the kids, and I love having kids at my Seder.
Wow, that sounds like a really fun time.
It is. It's great.
I bet your guests are so grateful that you've welcomed them into your home.
The more the merrier when it comes to Passover Seder, I always say.
That's great. I just have one last question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you teach writing to 4th through 6th graders.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you'd like to leave us with any tips for our young writers who may be listening to this video.
Okay. Well, looking at it from a different perspective was one tip. Conflict. Make sure your story has a beginning, middle, climax, and end. And then you have to figure out, what does your character want? Mm-hmm. And what keeps your character from getting what they want. And that's where you build in the conflict and keep the readers turning the pages of your story.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Joy. This has been a true pleasure.
Sure.
All right.
My pleasure.
Well, we are so glad that you came, and thank you once again for writing the Passover Mouse. It's so great to have another wonderful book in the library.
I'm happy that you enjoyed it.
All right. Take care, Joy.
Bye.